Good morning, grade 11s. Welcome to our webinar today. I see there's still a few people signing in. Let's give a few minutes to give them a chance. Hello, everybody. I'm still there, but people are still signing in. We'll give another minute. Good morning, everybody. We'll start now. I'm Wendy Pepler, Chief Education Specialist of Languages. Welcome to this webinar. Before we begin this webinar, let's cover some of the basics. If you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be muted when joining the session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your question in the question box below or on your right, or raise your hand. To raise your hand, click the icon on your dashboard below or on your right. Download this presentation in the handout box below or on your right. You can do it now. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. Remember to send us your questions. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in the attendee being dismissed from the session. If we did not get your question, please send an email to academics@impact.co.za. Questions in the question box will be answered and made available afterwards. If you did not receive the questions and answers, please send an email to info@impact.co.za. You can also visit Impact's website for the recordings of this session and past sessions. https://www.impact.co.za. All COVID-19 online schooling and past class videos can be found on the website. I'm going to go through June examinations again, which you will start writing on the 1st of July. Paper 1. Section A, Comprehension for 30 marks. Section B is a summary. You have to, as home language learners, present it in paragraph form for 10 marks. Section C, Language in Context for 30 marks. Please take note that some of these marks will be for visual literacy. Paper 2. Section A, Poetry. You have to study all the poems for term 1 and 2. 4 of these poems will be in the paper, of which you must answer 2. Question 5 for 10 marks is an unseen poem. This is compulsory. Section B, Drama, Othello. Question 6, contextual questions for 25 marks. Question 7 will be a literary essay for 25 marks. Both these questions are compulsory. Paper 3, you will have to, in section A, write an essay for 50 marks. And section B, you have to write 2 transactional texts, each counting 25 marks. You need to, for the June examination, study the following for paper 2. The poems: Journey of Magi, A Piece of Earth, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night, London, Their Lonely Betters, and Notes on Answering an Unseen Poem. And then the drama Othello, you need to study the entire play. As you know, we have already started with term 3 literature. You will also notice that term 3 is extremely short because of the COVID-19, and therefore I have already started with this to make sure we have completed all our literature by the end of term 3 so that there is enough time for revision before your final examination in November. The poem that we discussed last week was My Last Duchess, and today we are studying The Night Train. And we are looking at The Fault in Our Stars. Last week, we did the introduction and chapters 1 to 3. Today, I am going to go through chapters 4 and 5. You will note, however, when we go through the novel, I am not relating the entire story. I am taking out certain important facts which you must take note of because they are all valuable when writing a literary essay. Now, chapter 4, I asked you people to read up to the end of chapter 5. An Imperial Affliction. Remember last week we mentioned that an Imperial Affliction is the book within the book. It is interesting that Gus's reaction to the novel is the same as Hazel's. We learn that an Imperial Affliction ends mid-sentence. This you'll see on page 49. This aspect of the book is going to launch the two teens into a quest for answers, which becomes a significant metaphor upon which their relationship hinges. Now, I mentioned we learn an Imperial Affliction ends mid-sentence. In other words, it ends abruptly, as if it was suddenly stopped, as if the writer had suddenly stopped writing. And it has made these two teenagers very inquisitive as to what happened at the end of that novel. During chapter 4, we note that the story of an Imperial Affliction is about a girl, Anna, with cancer, who is the narrator of that story. Like Hazel, she has an honest and direct approach to her illness and its effect on her life. We also learn that Hazel has become obsessed with the question of what becomes of the other people in the novel and has tried repeatedly to contact the author, Peter van Houten, and acquire some kind of closure with reference to the story. He has never answered her letters and appears to have left America to live in the Netherlands. Isaac. We touched on Isaac last time. Remember, he had cancer in his eye. Isaac is the catalyst that drew Hazel and Augustus together, and he serves as a tragic example of how alienated cancer sufferers become in society. In spite of all the promises that Monica made to him, that was his girlfriend, she just can't go the distance and chooses to cut the relationship before Isaac's surgery. In the previous chapters, we learned that he was going to have his second eye removed. The reality is that as hard as it is to suffer from cancer, it is also just as hard for the people around the sufferers who end up sharing that burden. Note that Hazel tries to defend Monica. You'll find this on page 60. Her unselfishness extends to wishing to spare the people around her from the burden of her suffering. Isaac is not capable of seeing it this way, and he believes in the for better or worse aspect of true love. He says, "Always was a promise. How can you break a promise?" You'll find this on page 61. And to be fair, he can't be blamed considering that the relationship with Monica precedes the diagnosis of cancer in his second eye. Monica reveals that she can't handle, as Hazel says, the cancer, while Isaac is being forced to handle it because he has it. Isaac, on the other hand, feels this is a betrayal of what he thought was true, unconditional love. Teenage dating is fraught enough with difficulty. In other words, teenage dating is difficult, and there's a lot of obstacles. But add a deadly disease into the mix, and it becomes almost impossible to sustain. Take note of how Gus supports Isaac. He is there for him, playing games with him, and being completely undemanding and unsentimentally sympathetic. He understands Isaac's predicament because he shares his situation. Isaac lost an eye and is about to lose another, and Gus lost a leg. To help him relieve some of his rage, Gus encourages Isaac to destroy his basketball trophies. Remember, in the previous chapters, we learned that Isaac was a very promising basketball player before he got cancer and had his leg removed. You will find this on page 62. Augustus is about self-sacrifice and about doing something extraordinary for a worthy cause, not dying in oblivion. In the video game, he throws his body on the grenade to protect the children. He gives up the records of his glorious basketball successes so that his friend can ease his troubled heart, allowing Isaac to smash his trophies. Highlights in chapter 5. Hazels Parents. We learn that Hazels Parents worked for the Peace Corps, which is a volunteer program run by the United States government. It has a mission to provide assistance to people outside the United States with a view to building mutual understanding. You'll read this on page 65. Volunteers help mostly in the spheres of social and economic development and are typically American citizens who are university graduates who work abroad for 2 years after undergoing 3 months of training. They work with governments, schools, non-profit organizations, non-government organizations, and entrepreneurs in education, business, information technology, agriculture, and the environment. Papua New Guinea is the type of developing nature that would welcome the assistance of American experts in building its economy. Hazels' parents clearly dedicated themselves to the service of humanity in their youth. This reference to them fills in a little of the detail about their backstory. Hazel is very conscious of the effect that her illness has had on her parents. Their lives seem to be suspended in the service of their ill daughter, and this worries Hazel. She would like to know that her parents will be okay once she is no longer there. Hazel's parents. Her father is trapped in a dull job, and they struggle to pay the bills every month. Their ideals to contribute towards a better world have taken a back seat. Hazel's awareness of her disease's effect on her parents is prominent, and it may be one of the reasons why she is so obsessed with an imperial affliction, so desperate to find out what happens to Anna's mom and the Dutch tulip man. It's symbolic for her. If the book has a promising ending, then perhaps she'll accept the idea that her parents will be okay after the pain of her death too. The blood approves. Well, I hope you've read this and you know what the blood approves is. The quote at the beginning of The Blood Approves, "Say your life broke down. The last good kiss you had was years ago," comes from the poem Degrees of Grey in Philipsburg by Richard Hugo. The poem seems to emphasize the passing of time and the corrosion of all that was once familiar and dear. Yet it also highlights that which remains inside the soul despite inevitable change and deterioration. You'll find that on page 71. But if I refer back to what we said last week, remember at the beginning, I said that the author mentioned many other books and poems, fictional and non-fictional, in his book, The Fault in Our Stars. So you will still find a lot of referral to other books, to poems, etc. Considering the nature of the Price of Dawn series, that is the series that Augustus was reading and that he also gave Hazel the book to read as they exchanged books. In its perpetual war and the infinite lifespan awarded, the self-sacrificing Degrees of Grey in Philipsburg directly contrasts what the Price of Dawn seems to stand for. These novels highlight the glory in sacrifice and therefore the immortalization of the inevitably mortal, while the poem instead winds its way through the decay of everything humanly created. Hugo's poem illustrates not only the nostalgic yearning of a time past, but what was once promised in that time, and in that last good kiss, much like Augustus and Hazel's yearning for the promised potential in their time. Note that just as Hazel's personal philosophy is tethered to an imperial affliction, so is Augustus's voice present in the Max Mayhem books, of which Price of Dawn was once. Isaac and the meaning of love. Isaac keeps saying that he believes in true love, and this touches on one of the major themes of this novel, true love. Isaac's predicament demonstrates how fragile love is. The cancer seems to eat away at the very fabric of relationships in many ways. Hazel observes that many marriages do not survive the death of a child. The sacrifices that her parents make are all bound to put a strain on their marriage, and yet they seem to be able to hold it together, leaning towards each other and not away from each other. Hazel and Gus are on the cusp of love, and they will have to weigh their relationship against their survival odds in a cruel dilemma. Poor Isaac, not only has he to deal with the loss of his sight, remember he's losing his second eye, but the consequential abandonment by his girlfriend of 14 months. His girlfriend, Monica. We may think less of Monica, but can we really blame her? Staying with Isaac would have been incredibly difficult, and his blindness would have impacted both their lives profoundly. It can be easy for her to leave him like that. It can't be easy for her to leave him like this either. The romantic theme of this novel has much to do with the way that Augustus sets out to woo Hazel. It is typical of him that he unselfishly bestows his wish on her when he decides to take her to Amsterdam to visit Van Houten. Each of these cancer survivors were given one wish before they die. It was amongst themselves. So he bestows his wish on Hazel when he decides to take her to Amsterdam to visit Van Houten. Van Houten, the author of An Imperial Affliction. Then it is also characteristic of him that he constructs an elaborate scheme to unveil his plan to Hazel. His plan cleverly constitutes a whole array of traditional Dutch symbols. You'll find this on pages 86 to 87. And I think when you read it, perhaps you can relate to it when perhaps your girlfriend or your boyfriend have done something special for Valentine's Day. Embedded in this grand gesture is some insight into Gus's character. Firstly, the sacrifice, then also the heroic gallantry, creativity, and humor. These elements of his personality and his considerable charm endear him to Hazel, and of course to us, the readers. Okay. That was a summary of events in chapters 4 and 5. Now let's look at poetry, The Night Train by Hazels Disease. You will find this on page 152 of your study guide. I once again want to remind you to study as many notes as possible on literature and on poetry. You can Google and find perhaps some more notes on all your poems on the internet, as well as possibly on the novel, and of course on Othello. The Night Train. The Night Train is about a South African man who is traveling from Johannesburg, likely back to his home after a day of work. He sits in the third-class car, and as evidenced by the green seats. Only the third-class cars had green seats. Upper-class train cars had blue seats. He looks around in fear, worried about his own safety on the train. He is almost alone on the train, and this is something to be feared, for the lone passenger is always open to be mugged or murdered. As he speaks, the train car becomes a metaphor for all of South Africa and the need for safety, and his regret and his pain that his home country is no longer safe for him. The trains were, and still are, commonly locations where violent crimes were committed by gangs who terrorized ordinary commuters. This was a side effect of the grinding poverty that beset the colored communities. It spawned criminals desperate for money who preyed on their own communities. Now let's read the poem. There is no comfort here in this third-class coach. On this green resisting seat, I twitch and glance around. There are too few travelers on the night train. Crossing my legs and flicking my cigarette, I turn to stare through the window into the darkness outside, or is it my reflection I stare at? And glance impatiently at the wrong stations we stop at. Out. I must get out of here soon, for in this coach there is a smell which haunts me. Not the smell of stale man, but the whispering, nagging smell of fear. Let's look at the structure of this poem. It is free verse. Why? Because there's lack of punctuation and capitalization. The poet changes conventions, authority which represent limiting or controlling power. Simplicity of language and absence of poetic rhetorical devices. Let's look at the poem from the start. There is no comfort here in this third-class coach. On this green resisting seat, I twitch and glance around. In line 1, there is no comfort here. Immediately you feel a state of alarm. There is no comfort here. Line 2 to 3. In this third-class coach on this green resisting seat, you can feel that there are minimal conveniences supplied to the poorer users of the commuter train. The seats are hard and there is no privacy in the open carriage. Line 4, we pick up body language which displays nervousness and tension. I twitch and glance around. You can feel the nervousness, the tension that is building up. There are too few travelers on the night train. Crossing my legs and flicking my cigarette, I turn to stare. Lines 5 to 6. There are too few travelers on the night train. The repetition of few emphasizes his alarm. A nearly empty train leaves him open to an ambush by gangsters or thugs wishing to mug him for his money or valuables. You can also pick up the assonance sound of ooh. There are too few travelers. The sound made often when nervous. Lines 7 to 8. Crossing my legs and flicking my cigarette, I turn to stare. These are more body sign language of nervousness or body language of nervousness. Smoking also suggests he is strung out, he is on edge, he is nervous. The lowercase I also establishes his sense of vulnerability, powerlessness, lack of unique identity, personal value. Through the window, into the darkness outside. Or is it my reflection I stare at and glance impatiently at the wrong stations we stop at? Line 10, darkness. Through the window, into the darkness outside. This darkness also gives you the effect of threat, the unknown, threat, fear. Line 11, the eeriness of the reflection adds to the mood of uncertainty, doubt, nameless, misgiving. Or is it my reflection I stare at? Lines 12 to 13, and glance impatiently at the wrong stations we stop at. The wrong, none of the stations are the ones he will stop at, and the tension mounts as the safety that he seeks continues to elude him. Here we can pick up the sense of his impatience and his sense of claustrophobia, feeling trapped. In other words, he is becoming anxious to reach the station that he must get off at, and glance impatiently at the wrong stations we stop at. Out. Note one word in the line out. I must get out of here soon. How does this make you feel? For in this coach there is a smell which haunts me. Line 14, out. This is also stressed by the italics so that it seems to scream. Also, its position alone on the line emphasizes its emotional significance. This could be an exam question. What is the effect of out being written on its own in line 14? And it being stressed by italics. And you would say its position alone on the line emphasizes its emotional significance. It is the person has become extremely stressed. Line 16 to 17. For in this coach there is a smell which haunts me. When we see the word haunts, what does it make one feel of? We speak of a house that haunts. In other words, in films, these eerie films, the haunted house. Something living after death, inescapable, intangible, adds to the sense of dread and fear. Not the smell of stale man, but the whispering, nagging smell of fear. Line 18, it is not a physical or literal smell that fills him with dread. It is a figurative fear, the atmosphere that contains a threat. The smell implies a suffocating airlessness. Line 19, whispering, adds a sense of hidden conspiracy. Think back at the word of haunt. It's haunting and it's whispering. The sense of morphia. Nagging suggests it is repeated and unavoidable. Can't get away from this nagging feeling. In conclusion, the poem itself becomes a metaphor for what it was like for colored people limited and restricted by apartheid. There is a sense that one could not escape the confines of life you were allocated. You were destined to live like this forever. The system perpetuated itself. Poverty and despair generated a self-fulfilling cycle of more poverty and despair. If you have any questions, please post them in the question box. If you have not downloaded this presentation, please do so now. And if you have any questions and were unable to post them now, please send us an email at academic@impact.co.za. If you are not registered with Impact and you would like to do so, contact us at info@impact.co.za. That is all for today. Please have a lovely day tomorrow and carry on with your work. And then I urge you to carry on reading The Fault in Our Stars. Read at least the next 2 chapters. Thank you and goodbye.